Hi, do you have faith in God? Did you ever feel the situation that no one can help you? Watch this video about Daniel and his friends. How big their faith to our God that saved them from the room of fire and on the lion's den. The kingdom of Babylon conquered Jerusalem. They took the smartest and strongest young men away from their families in Jerusalem and brought them back to Babylon to serve the king. Daniel and his friends were some of these young men, and they were chosen to serve in the king's court and became his wise man. The king gave Daniel and his friends food and wine, but they didn't eat the food or drink the king's wine because it was against God's commandment. This made the king's servant afraid for his life. He took care of Daniel and his friends, and he thought if they refused the king's food, they would grow weaker than any young man. Then the king would be angry and put the servant to death. But Daniel trusted God and wanted to obey his commandments. Then Daniel asked the servant to give them water and grains for 10 days. Then compare their health with the health of the other young men, and the servant agreed. After 10 days, Daniel and his friends were healthier than all the other young men. They followed God's commandments and made them the wisest men in the court. However, the king of Babylon had a dream that upset him. So he demanded his priests and wise men to tell him what his dream meant. The king would not tell them his dreams and said that if the priests and wise men really had the power, they could tell him what the dream was and what it meant. Then the priests and wise men told the king that they could not interpret his dream if he would not tell them what it was. And because no man could do that, the king was so angry and said he would kill all the wise men in the kingdom, including Daniel and his friends. When the king's guard came to take Daniel and his friends, he asked for more time so that he could tell what the king's dream meant. Because Daniel knew that God knows and sees everything, even dreams. So Daniel told his friends to pray with him. Then God showed to Daniel the king's dream in a vision and taught him what it meant. Daniel thanked God for answering the prayers of him and his friends and for saving their lives. Afterwards, they went to the king and told the meaning of his dream. Daniel said that the king's dream was about a giant statue that was destroyed by a stone cut out of a mountain. The statue represented the kingdom of the earth, and the stone cut out of the mountain represented the kingdom of God that would fill the earth. The king believed Daniel because he knew that the latter spoke the truth. On the other hand, King Nebuchadnezzar built a giant golden statue and forced his people to worship it. And if they refused, they would be put into a furnace of fire. Daniel's friends named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego loved God and would not worship the king's false god. When the king learned about it, he was very angry. The three friends told the king they would only worship God and not his false idol. They believe God will protect them, and even if he did not, they would still stand up for what they believe. The king was furious at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and threw them into furnace of fire. But when the king looked at the furnace, he was surprised, because he saw a heavenly being in the fire with the three men, and they were not hurt by the fire. Afterwards, the king called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they walked out of the furnace. The fire had not hurt them or even burned their clothes. The three obeyed God's commandment even when their lives were in danger. They set an example and helped the king believe in God. Furthermore, Darius became the ruler over Babylon. He loved Daniel and wanted him to be the leader all over the kingdom, which is why some of the king's wise men were jealous, and They knew that Daniel prayed to God, so they tricked the king into making a new law. Anyone who prayed to God would be thrown to lion's den. But Daniel chose to pray to God anyway. And the wise men saw him and told the king that he was breaking the law. The king realized that the wise men tricked him and he found a way to save Daniel. But the king had to follow his own law. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den and the king stayed awake all night, fasting, so that Daniel would be protected. Early the next morning, the king rushed to the lion's den and called Daniel to see if he was still alive. Then Daniel called back. He told the king that God sent an angel to shut the lion's mouth and it did not hurt him. The king was happy that Daniel was safe. Then he punished the wise men who tricked him and ended the law. The good thing is, he taught his kingdom about God's power and goodness. You see, there's nothing impossible to our God if you just believe. Remember what he told us in Matthew 21:22, and all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive. Just like Daniel and his friends, we have to believe on our faithful God, because he was always in control. May our powerful Lord always bless us all.